Job 9 verse 1 to chapter 10 verse 19 through the Bible. Chapters 9 and 10, Part 1. Theme: Job's answer to Bildad. Job makes it very clear that Bildad has not met his need at all. He was not even talking in the field of his problem. At this point, he makes it clear that he makes no claim to perfection, and he knows that he cannot defend himself before God. What he needs is someone on his side to present his case. We will hear Job's longing for someone to be his mediator and his intercessor. In other words, we will hear Job's heart cry for Christ. Then Job answered and said, I know it is so of a truth, but how should man be just with God? Job 9 verse 1 and 2. That is, much of what Bildad had said is true. The problem is that his words haven't met the need of Job. They haven't spoken to the problem of Job. I know that in a general way your words are true, says Job, but the question is, how can I be just with God? Job surely needed the gospel at this point. He needed to know how a man could be just with God. Job says he wants some questions answered, and his friends are not answering the questions. If he will contend with him, he cannot answer him one of 1,000. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who hath hardened himself against him, and hath prospered? Job 9 verse 3 and 4. Job says, I don't pretend. If you think I am trying to put up a front before God, you are wrong. I know I cannot contend with him. He could ask me a question and I would never be able to answer. Job wants an answer to his questions, and he wants God to answer him. God is far removed from him. Which removeth the mountains, and they know not, which overturneth them in his anger, which shaketh the earth out of her place, and the pillars thereof tremble, which commandeth the sun, and it riseth not, and sealeth up the stars, which alone spreadeth out the heavens, and treadeth upon the waves of the sea. Job 9 verse 5 to 8. Here is a tremendous picture of God as the Creator. Job knows him as the Creator, but knows nothing about his tender mercy at this time, which maketh Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades, and the chambers of the south, which doeth great things past finding out, yea, and wonders without number. Job 9 verse 9 and 10. We can see that Job knew something about the stars. However, he is not attempting to say that he is in the situation of his misery because he was born under a certain star. That is without a doubt one of the most foolish things men say. Shakespeare had the answer to that when Mark Antony said, The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. Job knew the stars did not account for his situation. He recognized God as the Creator of the stars. Lo, he goeth by me, and I see him not. He passeth on also, but I perceive him not. Job 9:11. Job knows God as the Creator of the universe, and he also knows God as a spirit, and Job cannot see him at all. If God will not withdraw his anger, the proud helpers do stoop under him. How much less shall I answer him, and choose out my words to reason with him? Job 9 verse 13 and 14. Job knows that he wouldn't stand a chance if he came into the presence of God. If God should speak to him, he wouldn't know what to answer. If I had called, and he had answered me, yet would I not believe that he had hearkened unto my voice. Job 9:16. Job couldn't believe that he was really listening to him. For he breaketh me with a tempest, and multiplieth my wounds without cause. He will not suffer me to take my breath, but filleth me with bitterness. If I speak of strength, lo, he is strong. And if of judgment, who shall set me a time to plead? Job 9:17 to 19. Job asks, How in the world can I plead my case before him? If I justify myself, mine own mouth shall condemn me. If I say, I am perfect, it shall also prove me perverse. Job 9:20. Job says, "If I try to pretend I am perfect, my own mouth will condemn me." However, we will find later on that Job has a high estimation of himself. He is not the man who said, "For I know that in me, that is, in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing." Romans 7 verse 18. Job does not say that he is a perfect man before God, but he does contend that he is a pretty good man, in fact, a righteous man. Yet he recognizes that before God, he would not be able to defend himself. There are many men today who, because they do not know the Word of God, feel that they will be able to stand before God and meet His standards and are actually well-pleasing to Him. I remember an oil man in Nashville, Tennessee. He was one of a group of businessmen with whom I used to play volleyball 3 times a week. He was a godless man, although he was a church member. He and I were always on opposite sides, and he didn't like me to beat him. One night he had really been beaten, so he began to argue with me in the locker room. He said, "I heard you speak. I had a morning devotion on the radio in those days, about a religion that calls men sinners who need to come to Christ. I don't believe that stuff. I believe in helping people. In my business I give men jobs. I pay them money so they can buy beans to put on their tables. I think that is better than any religion you have to offer." How do you answer a man like that before a group of men all gathered in the locker room? Some of the men were church members, but most of them were godless and unsaved men. It was difficult to know how to answer that, until about a year later when we were in the locker room and that man was not there. He was in jail. He had been arrested for the way he had been conducting his business. He defrauded not only the government, but also his own employees. I shall never forget that another of the men mentioned his name and said, "Well, I don't think he'd have much of a chance before God. He didn't do so well before Judge so-and-so the other day." They found out he really wasn't putting beans on the plates of his employees, but he was really taking them off their plates. That really shook those men. Very candidly, I saw several of them in my church services, and I even had the privilege of leading one of those men to the Lord. But the point is that men have a misconception of God. They think they are good enough to stand before Him. Job is saying in effect, if I come into God's presence, He will think of something in me that I am not aware of, and I won't be able to answer Him.